I call Ron Mark.
Mr Speaker, it gives me some pleasure and some sadness to actually rise to speak to this debate on the government's 2015 budget. I guess I was reminded before I came down here that it was an interesting documentary on the former Australian Prime Minister Paul King. He provided a warning to members of his government they'd better give heed, this government had better give heed to, given the chest beating that we've seen over this I can see red, I can see red, I see red budget. Because that's all we see in New Zealand First. It is a red budget, not because it's a Labor Party budget, red because it's a deficit. Again, a deficit, despite all the promises and all the assurances. And I've got to say to anybody listening, when you're talking about the police budget, there's only one fact that one can actually bank on looking at this budget, and that is the fact not that there's a budget of 164 million increase for the police over the next 4 years. You can't bank on that, Mr Speaker. We can't bank on that. What we can bank on is a $41 million increase for this year, this first year. The rest of it's pie in the sky. The rest of it's all doctored and fudged to create the illusion of the potential of a surplus and maybe a tax cut, all designed to appease and appeal to New Zealanders who are driven by greed and driven by keeping their own money, no matter what cost that actually has on the rest of New Zealand in terms of delivering services. And the services I'm talking about are services delivered by our police force. I do actually want to digress a little bit because the Minister raised the question of transport funding and saying how much money this government is spending on transport. Well, let's be very clear about this. Rural provincial New Zealand, go to the NZTA website for all the new backbench members of the National Party, pull down the NZTA table and look at how much funding has been cut by your vote in this House to rural roading. For Carterton, Masterton and South Wairarapa, that cut is 1% each year for the next 4 years. That will result in a 1% increase in rates for all of those farmers, all of those rural people, if those councils want to keep pace with the same level of maintenance. That's a cut that the government members are voting for. Let's be clear about that. All the prattling on about how much money they're spending in Auckland, actually, in the Wairarapa, we actually don't give a stuff about how much money is spent in Auckland. We want to know how much money you're cutting from, this government's cutting from the funding that goes to our councils, because that shortfall will be met by rates increases, the very thing that young Nick Smith used to bleat on about when he was chastising local government. So let's look at this, the police budget. Looking at the estimates of appropriations, page 129, total appropriations 15 million less than it was in 2014. Output expenses are $5 million less than the budget 2014, and the capital budget is a staggering $13 million less. That's not an increase, Mr Speaker. They are all reductions. It is so sad that I've been reliably informed that on Saturday, the 21st of March, the night of the Cricket World Cup in Wellington, there were only 18 police officers on duty in the city that night at 11 p.m. 18 police officers in the whole of the Wellington city. And why do police numbers concern New Zealand First? Well, I'm sorry, folks. Beat your chests all you like over in the government benches. There's only one party alone that has consistently stood by police when it comes to numbers, and that is New Zealand First. Nobody in history has ever produced 1,000 extra police in one budget. Nobody in their short time in government has ever increased the police establishment by 2,500. New Zealand First did that. So when we look at the shrinking police force and the shrinking budget, and let's be clear, $41 million is not an increase in the police budget, Mr Speaker. It's simply marking time, treading water. It is keeping things where they are. And what does that mean? Well, no extra capacity, no extra equipment. There's no capital works in there, no extra capital works in there. There's certainly no pay rise. And there's certainly no increase in establishment. And in fact, what do we see? No matter where we go, closing of police stations in rural New Zealand. And my colleague sitting beside me, Ria Bond, who's proud and pleased to now be representing people in the Invercargill Southland area. In fact, the whole of the lower South Island. We know the cutbacks that have occurred down in the South Island and rural provincial New Zealand. We know the number of police stations in rural provincial New Zealand that are being closed. Mr. Speaker, that's not improving capacity. That's not improving capability. That's not improving the service to New Zealand. That's not improving their safety and well-being, improving the standard. And don't go bleating on to me, government members, about reported crime being down, because from out of the mouths of a large number of police officers that I talk to, they say, all we've done is change the way we collate the data. How convenient. Change the way we collate and report the data to present information that satisfies the government and suits their political needs. Crime is not down. Go and ask any police officer on the beat. Go and sit in a police station and go and talk to people who put in their insurance claims. What do they complain about now? Well, actually, they resign to it. They give up now. They say reporting to the police is simply a measure you have to do to get your insurance claim accepted by a company. They have no belief whatsoever that a police officer is going to turn up, that a police officer is going to take fingerprints, that a police officer is going to interview them, because Mr. Woodhouse, don't even go there, because we'll start to roll out the numbers for you, the Minister. We will start to roll out the numbers for the Minister. Now he's looking embarrassed. He's got that little look on his face, and I know, Woody, when he gets the Minister, when he gets embarrassed, that little smile comes on. I've seen it enough on the rugby paddock. Look, Mr. Woodhouse, you, the Police Minister, you know that crime is not down. The way it's been reported has changed. The way the statistics have been presented. And by the way, if we think that the shutting down of the services by Relationships Aotearoa is going to help reduce crime, we've got to be nuts in this House. Relationships Aotearoa actually is one of the frontline teams that is working to reduce domestic violence, working to help the police indirectly by resolving those matters and dealing with those people who are in that situation. So once Relationships Aotearoa is closed down, what do we think is going to happen with domestic violence? What do we think is going to happen with the number of people being bashed in their homes? And how many extra police officers are going to be needed to cater for that shortfall? This is short-term thinking. This is not holistic policing. This is short-term, narrow-minded, budget-focused, numbers-focused thinking, all orientated around producing a budget that gives a surplus next year, maybe. Well, it's not good enough. New Zealand First opposes this budget, and we will do so at the final vote.
I call Jamie Lee Ross.